Welcome to Phonogenics 101, a Riotboy production hosted by Jeremy Gloff. The podcast where people who love music discuss albums track by track. Please hit subscribe, and if you'd like to support this podcast, patreon.com/Jeremy Gloff or Venmo @Jeremy Gloff. And now, on to the music. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Phonogenics 101. We're here with the Fleetwood Mac family, much like Fleetwood Mac themselves.
He doesn't have.
Sorry.
I'm muting you, Jim. Much like Fleetwood Mac themselves, the lineup changes depending what era you're talking about. So this is the early years era. But we have a new person on our podcast. Sam, tell everybody about tell everybody everything.
All right. Well, I'm Sam Menser. I am a longtime Fleetwood Mac fan. My dad actually turned me on to particularly Peter Green with the album Then Play On. And that was the old CD, the original digital transfer that sounds basically like they ripped the vinyl record straight to the CD in the 80s. And so, from there, then I wanted to listen to the John Mayall stuff, and then the Dog in the Dustbin era. And I'm a guitar player, which is really why my dad thought to get me into that. But so yeah, I went down that path and became a huge fan, and then of course listened to the Bob Welch era. But I didn't get into it too much after that, although I respect Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks and of course John McVie and Mick Fleetwood are incredible. So to have any type of longevity like that in the music industry is remarkable. But really, it was Peter Green and his playing in particular that got me into the band. And by trade, I'm actually an audio engineer. Well, mainly an educator now. I teach at the public library in Chattanooga, and full time. We've actually got a recording studio there that was funded by an educational grant. The Benwood and Lyndhurst Foundations, I have to give them a shout out. If you ever go to Chattanooga, definitely check out the library, but also check out the aquarium because it's incredible. And I also will be teaching a class at University of Tennessee, Chattanooga in the spring. But prior to that, I was teaching up in Knoxville at a community college called Pellissippi State in their recording program. So I can't help but listen to these records with the ear of an engineer. I worked in Nashville. I worked in Ohio before that. So it's interesting to me from prior to really getting into the tech side, trying to recall how these albums sounded when I was just a guitar player, and now listening to them and hearing the techniques that they implemented. And I love Then Play On. I don't want to talk too much about that, but that's a really interestingly recorded album as well. But anyway, that's pretty much me. I love music. I've got a little boy. I'm married, and I do have a cat. And thankfully, she's doing okay.
Yeah, and a shout out to our panelist John, who's spending some time with his kitty tonight, having some special time. So we look forward to you coming back for Then Play On. And Alicia, my Sharon, also, this is her first Fleetwood Mac podcast where she's not here. So this is truly like the lineup before Christine McVie joined. It's all the dudes. Everyone else has been on the podcast before, but does anybody else want to say anything before we jump into the album? No? Jim, I muted you because there was background noise, but feel free to take yourself off mute and join in anytime. All right. Well, anyway, last month we talked about the debut album, Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac, or Fleetwood Mac, the Dustbin album, whatever you want to call it. I kind of jumped on Fleetwood Mac, well, I wasn't born in 75. But I really, really invested when I went back to the back catalog with Then Play On Forward. I love every single one of those albums. Then Play On from To Heroes Are Hard to Find. I say if I was on a desert island, I would take that whole bunch over Mirage and Tango in the Night. I know that's sacrilegious, but there's just some really special kind of mystical energy about these albums that's very otherworldly to me. I live in Florida, so I have driven through the Keys playing like some weird Bob Welch songs. And the first time I got Danny Kerwin's solo albums on CD, they came out in Japan just for a little bit on CD. I listened to those in the middle of the night through the Keys, and he has some like weird synthesizer stuff on him. So I'm a big Danny fan. He makes his first appearance today, and we actually have 3 albums to talk about. Cool. Mr. Wonderful was the proper second Fleetwood Mac album. Originally, I guess Mick Fleetwood wanted to call it, what was it, like Almost Big Enough or something nasty. Then they wanted to call it Utter Sucker, but then they settled on Mr. Wonderful with a naked picture of Mick Fleetwood. They were nasty in the early days, nasty men. Then there was a compilation released in the United States, English Rose, which had some songs from Mr. Wonderful, then some other odds and ends. And then in the UK, they had a compilation, The Pious Bird of Good Omen. Amongst these 3 albums, there's kind of a mix of everything. So what we'll do is we're going to start off with Mr. Wonderful track by track, and then we'll take it from there. I was going to say something, but I forgot. So what do you guys think of this album cover? Mick Fleetwood, naked. Not something that I really fantasize about. I had to say sorry, Mick. But and even on rumors, like he had like the balls hanging there. So I feel like he's just a nasty guy. Tim, are you able to get yourself off mute? There, I said.
Well, while he's getting off of mute, I'll say that I actually like the goofiness of the album cover and would prefer it enormously to the Heroes Are Hard to Find album cover, which is a bizarre echo of it, and I'd prefer this one. So,
yeah. Well, yeah. All right. Further thoughts on the album cover of Mr. Wonderful?
It's as expected. Nothing surprising.
I mean, the first album was a huge hit in the UK, so this follow-up must have been eagerly awaited.
It was. It ended up number 10 on the UK charts.
Okay.
And I don't think it was released in the United States.
Nope. This is the thought that kept coming like almost in my mind. It's a real disservice in the streaming generation that the proper versions of these albums are not on streaming. It's the Blue Horizon box set with all the talking and shit. And I hate, as a purist, like I want the original album as the band sequenced it and wanted to come out. So I'm so glad that I have this on CD, because I turned that damn streaming right off. I heard like some studio chatter. I'm like, I'm not doing this shit. So if you're listening to this on streaming, that's not the original album as it was intended. In some of the later ones, they even changed the track listing, right? Some of the compilations, I think they're not even the original albums.
It's confusing, to say the least.
Right. Does anybody want to talk about...
Things don't get streamlined for Fleetwood Mac until Kilnhouse. They don't really... Well, actually, really technically, Blues Jam at Chess, but once that happens, then all of the American and UK releases are the same.
Right. And I must admit, I was never a huge fan of Blues Jam at Chess, so we're not going to cover that on this podcast. But if anyone wants to comment on it, you're welcome to.
It's an amazing record. Shame on you.
Well, I'll do that one right after John McVie's Got a Band with Lola.
Hey, my dad has that CD. Mick Taylor plays on it.
Has anyone on this podcast listened to John McVie's Got a Band?
Yes, I think I own it somewhere.
Is it good? Does anyone like it?
Yeah.
Well, there's some like that lady singer.
Mm-hmm.
I think she does one song and she's really a good singer.
Well, I poo-pooed that Time album until I listened to it. Then I'm like, I love this album.
Okay. Well, there's just...
Well, let's get to the Mr. Wonderful.
Okay, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Mr. Wonderful. Yeah, I know, because Tony's on a time schedule. So nudge me along. Because
Right.
I've already worked an 8-hour shift and volunteered, so I'm like, bleh. Mr. Wonderful. The album opens with Stop Messing Around. It's a songwriting collaboration by Peter Green and their manager, right?
Yeah, it's someone in-house.
Yep, in-house. My notes, great opener, great solo from Peter Green, collaboration with Clifford Davis, and enter into the picture Christine McVie and a horn section. Christine obviously is having a blast on this album. I almost feel like she's having more fun than she ever had in her life any other time because she's just going crazy on the keys. What do you guys think of this song? Go ahead, Jim.
Yes. Yes, I'll read my notes. A beautiful lead guitar from Peter Green. I like the saxophone work on this. It's a great blues track to start the album. This proves that this band's first album was no fluke. Oh yeah, this is something that's pretty cool. I was looking at stuff. This was the last that tribute to Peter Green in 2020, and I was looking for versions, and this came up on YouTube. And Christine McVie sang that at the Peter Green tribute in 2020, just before COVID, and that was her last performance in her life. So, I mean, that was a good jam. That was, if you can pull that up, the Peter Green tribute. And it's just fortunate that they did do that because after COVID, a lot of things, like Christine not being around and stuff like that. Okay. That's about, it's just good, a good track. It's.
I feel like they kind of take what they did on the first album, kind of bump it up a notch. Like, I feel like there's some energy there.
Yeah, Christine adds to it in the horn section with it.
Now, Sam
kind of filled it up.
Sam will appreciate this. Sam will appreciate, because the first album they plugged into the board, right? And then this one they mic'd the amps. Is that correct? That it was recorded differently?
Well, the first album I think has a very dour, kind of muted appeal. It's very kind of, with the exception of a couple of Jeremy Spencer tunes, it's a pretty down album. It's a pretty subdued album. And this one, it sounds like they got really drunk and are having a lot of fun. It's a great opener, I think. And Christine plays piano on all of the Peter Green songs and none of the Jeremy Spencer songs.
And very well, I might add.
And you can hear the difference in the style of the piano playing.
Oh, so Jeremy does on his songs. Okay.
Yeah, but go ahead. I was going to say that Mike Vernon actually commented on this in the Blue Horizons liner notes, how you could tell that's Jeremy playing because he oftentimes does a lot of piano glissandos up and down the keyboard, whereas Christine McVie's is probably more rooted in conventional playing in particular.
Jeremy's style is very effective in a kind of primitive way, but what I think is really, and you can hear it on Stop Messing Around, is that it's what she's not playing, which is really amazing. She does such a great job of keeping a restrained performance, and yet you hear all of the style. You hear an amalgamation of all kinds of blues pianists from that period or the mid-'60s. You can hear them. And so it's really quite a piece.
All right, Sam, you had something to say?
Yeah. Well, one thing, I think going back to the cover art, I think if you were in a record store, in 1968 and you saw that, it would definitely capture your eye and you would be like, what is this? I remember when I first saw it, I was like, what? Why would they make that their album cover? But it's unique, it's quirky, it's who they are as a band. Going back to the song, I went and I listened to B.B. King's live at the Regal like about a month ago, and I'm not like a huge B.B. King buff or anything like that, but I read somewhere else, I think it was a Mick Taylor interview where he referenced that, and he said, oh yeah, all the British guitar players that played for John Mayall, they revered this album, so I listened to it, and it's very, I mean, it's very similar to this Mr. Wonderful album insofar as you've got the saxophone players. I'm pretty sure there's a piano too. It's a live album. This album was cut pretty much live. Now, I was surprised to hear that Jeremy Spencer must have overdubbed his piano, but that's interesting because when I was listening today, not to get to another song, but I heard the piano slide and I was like, I never knew Christine McVie played like that. So that did stick out to me today. And that makes sense because I've heard Jeremy Spencer play piano like that a lot on the live recordings and the BBC recordings and things like that. But anyway, my whole sort of philosophy on this record is it's the first album with expanded arrangements, with the saxophone players, the various piano players, and my broad philosophy, because this is my first appearance on, and thank you by the way for having me. But
Sure, of course.
I feel like this era of the Peter Green era, Fleetwood Mac, in a way parallels blues music in general, where you have the more stripped down sound in the beginning, and then you have these expanded arrangements with different instrumentation, and then you get into the psychedelic blues era of Then Play On. Something I've always found very interesting, and then if you want to take it a step further and look at Peter Green's first solo album, you're way off into psychedelic exploration and things like that with blues roots. So big picture, macro level, I find Peter's period in this in the band absolutely fascinating, and this song, the outtakes are great too. I believe on that expanded edition that you referenced, I believe there's another take of. Am I right? Is there another take of "Stop Messing Around" on there? Okay, yeah, I thought so. And then I think they played it at the BBC too, at some point. But it definitely, and live on bootlegs, I'm sure I have it too. But it seems to be almost one of his quintessential numbers. And I guess there's some controversy with Clifford Adams getting writing credit. I think it was in the biography by Martin, is it Selmans, where essentially Clifford Adams convinced Peter Green that, hey, this is better for taxes if I'm on as a songwriting partner. So anyway, yeah, that's my piece. I think everybody is outstanding, and it has that live raw feel that a lot of bands are too afraid to tread in that territory anymore.
Yeah, this was an album that I never listened to a lot, but I really enjoyed it. Like listening through it, all the way through. I enjoyed it. Any other thoughts on "Stop Messing Around"?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jim.
Maybe Clifford Adams brought the liquor or something like that, or arranged the horns or something. I just joke. I don't know. This is probably. I think Green probably wrote the lyrics, and Clifford might have did some of the arrangements or something to that effect.
Clifford Adams is Clifford Davis. They're the same person.
Okay.
That's the manager.
Okay.
I feel like he probably didn't do
anything
shit.
to do. I think Sam is right. I don't think he had anything to do with making the song or arranging it. It just had to do with him wanting some money.
He just wants that money, honey. Because there's no stylistic difference than Peter Green's solo compositions from the time. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have that Clifford flavor. Like, I don't think he did shit except take the money.
Yeah, from what I gathered in the liner notes, a lot of these songs were essentially not improvised live, but coordinated live in the studio, where the horn arrangements were essentially come up on the spot as they were working through the takes. So I also highly doubt that Clifford Davis actually had a significant role in this song.
Well, he took the money. All right.
He did, yes.
Stop Messing Around. Thumbs up from me.
Oh, yeah, that's great.
All right. Jeremy Spencer enters the picture. I've Lost My Baby. A slow Jeremy Spencer blues. It's nice to have a Jeremy Spencer song on this album that doesn't sound like all the other ones.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Agree.
I like this song, though. I thought it was a good second track. What do you guys think?
Go.
Go ahead, Jim.
Yes, it's a nice, slow, grinding blues song. Well, I wrote that Christine was playing on this. I guess not. And let's see. The band seems to be more cohesive and confident, knowing that they're a legitimate act in the British blues movement. That's pretty much it for that one.
Okay, you know what? Let's do something different. I'll just go in the same order. I'll go Jim, Tony, Sam, and then end with Nick. How's that sound?
Okay, I'll be first.
If you don't have any thoughts, then just say pass. Tony, got any thoughts on this one?
I would like it a lot more if it wasn't the same riff that I hear about 4 other times on the album. So, I mean, if you hear this in totem, if you hear it the first time, you're like, okay, yeah, cool. I like the kind of like after hours feel of this. But then, I mean, in context with the 4 other tunes that it sounds like, I just have no interest in it after a while. It's like, then it's just annoying. So, I mean, to me, it's like and I love Jeremy's stuff. But this album, it's like he wrote, what is it, 5 or 6 songs, and 4 of the songs sound identical.
Well, I'm like, well, yeah. Sam, what do you have to say?
Well, this one doesn't, if I'm recalling it correctly, it doesn't have the traditional sort of Elmore James, coming in like that. I mean, unless I'm mixing it up with another song. When I listened to this, I was like, oh, that's a great original by Jeremy Spencer. I mean, it's his style, but it's slower. And it's a departure from the first record where I think he plays that riff on 3 or 4 songs, something like that. I can't remember, but I enjoyed it. It was probably my favorite number of his on this album. Evening Boogie would probably be the second, which I mean I wouldn't say it's forgettable, but it's we'll talk about that later. But those 2 were my favorite Jeremy Spencer numbers on this album. And I mean the band, I mean, what can you say about the rhythm section? If you're an aspiring blues guitar player and you want to go to a open blues jam, like just play rhythm along with this record. I mean, there's not a better selection of songs that you could learn from.
All right, Nick, what are your thoughts on this one?
So I think that the drums on this song in particular are mixed a lot better. It's probably because of the more varied dynamics. With Stop Messing Around, it was certainly just forte the entire time, driving through for 2 minutes, 20 seconds. This one, like other people were mentioning earlier on, it's far different from Spencer's other compositions, and I think that's one of the reasons why it sticks out more so than any of his others on this album. And I would agree and attest to pretty much what everyone else said, and that it's probably his second best or maybe even his best composition out of his 5 or 6 that he offered for this album.
5 or 6 or 3 if you count the other ones as all one song. Sure. I give this a thumbs up, though. I like this one. I've lost my baby.
So
again. All right, Peter Green's back. Rollin' Man. To me, this song had almost like a New Orleans feel, a tiny bit. Okay. It's like something Marsha Ball would do. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but I love the piano riff, a nice shuffle. Christine really makes a difference. I love the horns.
Yep.
They just really take it up a notch. Jim, what did you think of this one?
Yes, that is definitely Christine on piano, and the rest is history. I mean, this is kind of like she fills that one spot, Mick and John fill another spot, and then the guitarists, whoever they are, and it's Fleetwood Mac. I just feel this is kind of like towards the Fleetwood Mac that is famous. I love the sax players playing off Peter Green's guitar work. It's kind of like they call it a call and response thing where, and Robert Plant would do this with his voice with Jimmy Page. I mean, it's in country music. It's something that's in a lot of music in different ways. And let's see, I love the sped up outro. A very solid, fun song. this is really good. It's a real authentic blues number. It's really nice. It's rolling, man. Just the lyrics kind of fit the music, and it's just a good piece. It fits together rather well.
Yeah, I loved it too. All right, Tony, what do you think of this one?
It's my favorite song on the record. Maybe it's that and one other song tied to it, but I heard the song when I was 12 years old. I don't want to tell you how long ago that was, but I can tell you that it was my first foray into the Peter Green era, and when I heard the song, I fell in love with it. The call and response Jim is talking about. There's so many things about this song that I think point to later Fleetwood Mac. The call and response, we hear it again on Like It This Way.
Oh boy.
That you hear it later on, and you hear it in a lot of the guitar work on the Blues Jam at Chess, and then in the jams on Then Play On. So it's like, that's really great. But the piano is I think the standout instrument here. That core trio is established, the Mick, John, and Christine, and it sounds, you can hear Don't Stop in it. You can hear Get Like You Used to Be from their live shows in it. It's kind of like all of that is there, and then with the sped or the halftime outro is just fantastic. It's a wonderful. I just think it's a great tune.
Yeah, I love this one when I was listening to it. Sam, what were some of your thoughts on this?
Before you go, I'm so sorry. Oh, yeah. I did want to mention that my favorite, what do you call album? Freddie King album. There's a song on it called "Woke Up This Morning," which is almost identical to it.
Oh,
but like in terms of rhythm and melody, but that album came out a year after this one, so I don't know who's copying who. So
I bet Clifford Davis wrote both of them. Sam, what were your thoughts on this one?
I agree with pretty much everything that everyone has said. I think that once again, like maybe it's because I listened to that Live at the Regal album so recently, but I hear that B.B. King sound, especially in Peter Green's voice. I think that one thing that's sort of overshadowed by his guitar playing is his voice. I think he's got an incredible voice, and I think that B.B. King has an incredible voice too. And now personally, I've listened to a lot more Albert King than B.B. King, but I feel like, B.B. King could pull off doing Nat King Cole songs. You're not going to hear Albert King do a Nat King Cole song. It's almost like a very rich, almost classical or classically trained vocal, and the diction comes through clear. And I think this song in particular, I think is an excellent vocal performance by Peter Green. I think that most of his vocal performances are amazing, but especially for a British guy, in his early 20s, and he pulls it off. And I think that's one thing that made him really stand out apart from his guitar playing.
Yeah, I love Peter Green's voice. Nick, any thoughts?
Yeah, so these first two albums were pretty big blind spots for me. I really only had interest in the post Fleetwood Mac Blues era, so pretty much the third album to the very last studio album, Say You Will. So this is essentially maybe the second or third time I've ever listened to this album, and the thought that came through my mind was, wow, these first three tracks on Mr. Wonderful are just slam dunks, every one of them. And this is probably one of my favorites on the album too. It's super peppy. Love Christine's playing. The saxophones have nice interplay with the rest of the instruments. I also noticed that in comparison to the first album, there's hardly any harmonica on this album, and the saxophones essentially supplant that. And I probably prefer the saxophones in general in comparison to the harmonica. And you'll find that pretty much the saxophones are on the entire album. They pretty much had these people in the recording studio the entire time, coordinating with them, and it works really well. I think that the album really is enhanced by those instruments in particular.
Right. I think you summed it up great. Because I always kind of wrote off this album as like, that second album slump. And when I was listening to it, I'm like, this is freaking good, man. I think I'm gonna, be listening to this for a while now. So it was a little bit of a blind spot for me too. I was wrong. I admit it here on Phonogenics. All right, but now we're getting to the reason why I did kind of write off this album, because all I remembered was and here it is, Dust My Broom. Here comes Elmore James, Jeremy Spencer. We're gonna have deja vu because we're about to have the same conversation over and over and over again about a few songs. But Jim, I know. Let's start with your notes. Dust My Broom. I know my time ain't long.
Yes, that's a good song. Okay, a Fleetwood Mac version of the often covered blues classic. This is a very deep song about a troubled life and relationships. Fleetwood Mac covers this well. Now, this started out as a Robert Johnson song, the old Mississippi blues 1920s. And then Elmore did his version and updated, and Fleetwood Mac kind of filled it out and did a very credible version themselves. This song is always mentioned. It's, Dust My Broom. I think Dust My Broom, I looked up what it meant, and it meant kind of like getting out of town quick, and kind of covering up your tracks kind of situation. That's kind of what it refers to, the lyrics. This is a very good song lyrically, if you look into it.
I discovered this song because Ike and Tina Turner did a version.
Okay, cool.
That's how I found it.
It's everybody does it.
Well, let's shake it up a little bit, because if we always go the same order, it's gonna be boring. Let's go to Sam next.
Yeah. Well, I kind of echoed what Jim's saying. It's a great song. I mean, Robert Johnson's lyrics were ahead of their time, in my opinion. I'm a huge fan. This is, through the Elmore James filter, and I think it's an excellent performance. And I think they really, this is where Mike Vernon, I feel like maybe could have taken the reins and said, this by having such a similar song reoccurring on this album, it does a disservice to the performance of each one, right? I mean, we're all gonna say like, this is the third time, once we get to, what is it? Need Your Love Tonight. Like, I mean, we're going to be like, yeah, we've heard this before now. I think if they had just left Dust My Broom on here, or Dr. Brown, or just one of them, and then came in with a different song, I think then our ears wouldn't be bored. But we'll get to that. But I just think it's a great performance of a great song. It's Jeremy Spencer does Elmore James doing Robert Johnson. And I mean, the band's rocking. I mean, imagine this live in 1968 in a pub. The killer.
Tony, what are your thoughts?
He summed it up perfectly. I think that if it was its own piece, I would be perfectly fine with it. I think it's got the right mood, it's got the right vibe. It's just that it's done so frequently on the record that it becomes conspicuous in its how frequently it's done. But if we look at this, and I've always privileged this one over the others, because not only because it's first, but because of its history. Because of it, because this is one of those songs where even before I knew the blues well, this was one of those songs where people kind of would refer to this. And so it has a weight on its own, but I'm jaded from listening to the rest of the album year after year. I've listened to this album so many times, and after a while I just skip.
Well, Nick, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, so this song is actually pretty derivative of, I believe, My Time Ain't Long. The instrumentation and overall vocal delivery, it's actually very different in comparison, but I believe My Time Ain't Long was actually the band's very first single. To my knowledge, it really didn't do anything on the charts, and then Spencer decided to cover the song proper on this album, and would agree that of the four identical Dust My Broom clones, this is probably one of the better ones on the album.
All right, so then we move on. Love That Burns, a brooding, slow brooding Peter Green song. Let's start off with Sam with this one because you're the green guy.
Oh man, I remember reading. By the way, I found out about this on the Fleetwood Mac message board, the Ledge. This podcast and everything. So I've been on there. I'm Les Paul 7, as if there were 6 before me. I don't know. But there's a great. We should put this somewhere. There's a great post by Dino or Dino from 2016 where he lists all of the basically the anthology of Fleetwood Mac recording at the BBC during this era. And that was something that I was really interested in researching and talking about because these were the songs that the band was actively playing during this period while they're recording. And I believe it's I'm trying to find it right here, but I believe they did a version of Love That Burns on the BBC, and it was one of the few recordings that didn't survive. So that kind of bummed me out to read that, but it's absolutely I mean it's to me it's hard to say, but it might be the best, my favorite at least, song on this album, on this particular album. And I don't think they ever did play it live. I was just looking at the setlist FM to see if they did play it live ever. At least it hasn't. I'm sure they might have, but it wasn't listed as somebody could confirm that they had played it. But yeah, it's, you said slow burn, and I mean I don't know a better way to describe the song. It's I mean, Peter Green's talking about, I think, love in pretty much every one of these songs on this album. So that's all I can really say about it.
It's interesting because as these albums goes on, like Peter gets a little bit darker every album till finally he's gone. All right, well, Tony, let's go to you for this one.
I love this tune. Again, the guitar is fantastic. Peter's voice, as Sam mentioned earlier, is fantastic throughout the record. But again, for me, it's the piano. In the way in which the piano interacts with the drums and the bass, the drums are almost kind of lagging, and the bass is almost racing ahead. So it's like it's just such an exciting sound that if you took everything else off the track except the trio, it would sound amazing still. It's got that kind of like hypnotic 12-bar thing going on that's just like that you just imagine it's 3 a.m. somewhere. I love it. It's a great piece.
All right, then we'll go to Nick, then we'll end with Jim for this one.
Yeah, so musically it kind of reminds me of If I Put a Spell on You, very much within that format. I think the most notable thing is actually the book that Mick Fleetwood published with the same title. I expressed some curiosity in getting it myself, so I decided to check online to purchase it, and then I realized that it was $900, so I backed off of that immediately. However, I do think with the instrumentation, the piano is what actually perked my ears in particular, especially that solo at the end. What irks me a little bit is that they essentially faded it out after she really starts to cook. Christine starts to cook.
They do that to Christine throughout her career.
Yes.
Every Fleetwood Mac album.
They really do.
They do it on every song of hers when she's cooking at the end. That's when they fade it out.
Like over and over on Tusk, right when it starts to pick up, like brrr, there goes the fade button.
Brown Eyes, they do the same thing with Peter Green.
She does it to herself on Smile I Live For. Yeah. I mean, you know.
All right, I'm going to step away for a second, but Jim, take this one away.
Yes, it's you guys covered it pretty good. Yes, Jeremy laughed. A slow burning blues song that describes heartache that is beyond a physical relationship. This is a little deeper. It's not like, having a little fun in that way. It's a little deeper emotional thing to it. I love Green's vocal on this, and I love the piano outro. So this is the one you pretty much remember from that era. It's it kind of shows the darkness of what Green was going through. It's a lot of there's a lot of in the earlier stuff. There's a lot of happy-go-lucky. And fun with the girl stuff. And this is a little bit different. So a very good song.
All right, I stepped away so I could show you guys my copy of Love That Burns. I do have the book.
Oh, nice.
Okay.
So I bought it when it came out. It's a pretty cool book. Yeah, so all right. I feel like we should just take the next two songs and talk about them together.
Yeah.
We have Jeremy Spencer, Ending Side 1. Now, I think it might have been better in the vinyl days because you had to get up and turn the record over. But when you have the CD, like the two songs go right into each other. And I think that's kind of a game changer. So, the side ended with Dr. Brown and then started with Need Your Love Tonight. Essentially, to me, the same song. In the CD version of the album, not the best thing. So let's start with Nick, someone who came into this album. What were your thoughts? Did you think the CD was skipping? But what did you think was going on here?
What?
I was aware that there were 4 very similar songs on the. Am I coming through? I am coming through. Good.
Yes,
so I was very similar that there were 4 very similar songs on the album, 2 of which were back to back. So if I didn't have this information, yes, I would have been under the impression that the album was skipping. But sure enough, that is not the case. I think that the vocals on this song in particular sound very distorted, more so than even many of the other songs on the album. I know that's somewhat of a byproduct of the band using a PA system, in that the vocals weren't going directly into the console, as is the case with many other albums, but it kind of does detract from the listening experience for me. And even so, it's still probably one of the better ones of the Dust My Broom clones, even with those problems still existing.
All right, Tony, why don't you go?
Is it me, or does that riff that he plays, when he first plays it, and what do you call Dust My Broom, then he plays it here, and then he plays it next, is it get faster every time? Or is it just my ears? Every time I hear it, I think he's upping the speed a little bit, but it could just be that I'm getting used to it and it's starting to, I don't know. But I was maybe I'm trying to find a difference too. But like I said, really well done, kind of interchangeable.
Yeah. Jim, what are your notes?
Yes, Jeremy puts a lot of fun in this blues cover. I love this song's cheeky, suggestive lyrics, a favorite of mine from that era. And I don't know who, I think it's Buster Brown wrote it. I think he's a Chicago blues guy. I think I looked it up and I kind of forgot who he was. But this is I think they played this live a lot. There's a lot of live versions of this, and it's a very fun live song. I'm pretty sure they did it live. And I mean, it's just the suggestion of the lyrics. You don't need a prescription lyric and all that stuff. That's really a very, it's suggestive and cheeky, and it's fun. It's not nothing really, like, you don't take it too serious, but that's rock and roll. I mean, you can get you just kind of point to something and you can get away with stuff. It's like comedy, good comedians, they go there and you're not condemned for it. So it's very good. I like this one. I think I've heard live versions, and it's really fun to listen to.
Sam, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's definitely a fun song, and I sought out the original and listened to it. And one thing I noted, and Buster Brown, yeah, it's listed on, I think 1960 is at least the version I heard was the Buster Brown, Dr. Brown. I think what's really interesting is, like, if you listen to, that's Peter Green in the background just comping the rhythm, and he does it exactly like the original record. And that's the stuff that I listen to when we get these sort of repeated Jeremy Spencer slide guitar numbers is I'm listening to like what Peter Green's doing back there. Now after listening to Tony, I need to listen to what Christine is doing, but I guess she's not on this song. But that it's my dad's a huge Christine McVie fan, so it's kind of like he's in here somewhere talking to me in this podcast. But anyway, I wanted to say that the comping in the background is authentic to the original. It sounds great. I think that had they done something a little bit different with Jeremy Spencer's guitar, or he did, and he's done that before. He doesn't always play the Elmore James style with the slide guitar, or just have him just play piano on this, and maybe have a saxophone lead break or something. That's where a producer. That's what the producer's supposed to be coming in and saying. But maybe they had a slew of recordings, and then they said, "These are the songs we're going to go with for the record." When I was mentioning earlier that I looked up what they were playing at the BBC at the time. Now, a little bit after this recording session, they recorded a great version of Sweet Home Chicago, where Peter Green plays harmonica and Jeremy Spencer does the lead vocal. And I just think, like, man, what if they just ended the side with something like that? Something a little bit different that they were into at the time. I think you're absolutely right, Jeremy, about the CD era, because it's like almost like listening to like an outtakes record when you hear that riff come in back to back like that. But great performance otherwise, I would say.
All right. Well, do we have anything to say about Need Your Love Tonight? Is there
Okay.
Not necessarily. I want to say that, I want to echo what Sam. He doesn't always do this riff. It's just on this record. On the Blues Jam, or the Blues in Chicago, whichever title you're going with, his work on there is fantastic. Jeremy's work, and I love his work on Kiln House. I love it. So it's just, for me,
I love Kiln House.
This one record that is just, I don't know what he's doing here, or he just got, or it's a shtick. Like, he's like, how many times can I get away with it? Maybe, I don't know.
Okay.
He might have been in on the joke.
I was going to say that this is probably more of a byproduct of them having a shortage of time in the studio, where they only had maybe a couple of days to record it. They were throwing together material, and there was some overlap in terms of the instrumentation. I think it just comes down to that in particular. It's not like, let's say You Will, for example, where that was a labor of love for 6 years. Well, Buckingham, I think, started in 1995, but if you look at the gestation
also.
Yeah, 6 figures in terms of all the money going into that album too. For this, it was more so that they assembled some songs, played through it a couple of times, and then mixed it, and that was put out. That was the record. It was more straightforward and streamlined back then, just because of the simplicity of it.
I mean, by the time we get to Say You Will, they have 2 whole different mixes of the album by 2 whole different mixers. Here, Clifford Davis squandered away the whole budget buying that beer for the band. All right. Well, let's move on from this Elmore James. I'll go ahead, Jim.
I got a few notes. Let's see. Yeah, very similar guitar intro as the previous song. I thought Mick and John are very prominent here. This song doesn't break much new ground on this album. The 6 feet under lyric is certainly disturbing. I think that was a poorly, not that great written song. It just, kind of a dud. They could have thrown something else in there, but,
Well, luckily things pick up because Peter Green steps back up to the front with I'll Be Your Baby, another slow Green jam with good piano and horns. I love these Peter Green songs on here. Sam, let's have you start with this one. I like when you start with on the Peter Green ones.
Oh, I hit the wrong one.
Yeah, I think, for someone who's playing just a guitar straight into an amplifier, without any pedals, or, effects pedals and things like that, Peter Green's variation of his tone is incredible. I mean, he on this album, he ranges from, pretty smooth sounding to very like almost that honky, almost like a Telecaster sound, and there's been plenty written about how his pickups were out of polarity in his guitar, and so he achieved that sound. And actually, I'm pretty sure that I can't remember exactly the model, but that's a BB King sound. BB King had that. Man, I can't remember the model of the guitar. One of you guys might know, but is it a Gibson like ES 355 or something like that? And there's actually a switch on those, I believe. I don't want to get this wrong, but oh well. That
Don't worry, the YouTube commenters will be very quick to correct you.
Yeah.
Don't worry about that.
It's a almost honky sound that misses some of that. It's almost like it misses some of its guts, but that's how you get that sound. It's quacky. It's almost like playing through a wah pedal cocked at a certain angle. It's filtered, it's filtering out some of the meat in the tone. And I just am amazed, that Green was just a master of flipping his pickups and adjusting his tone and volume knobs on the fly. Like that was his pedal board. And a lot of guitar players today, they turn everything up all the way on the guitar, and then they as some people have said, some of the old school guys say, they tap dance on their pedals while they're playing, but that's all right here, for Peter Green. It's all in his fingers, and it's all in his knobs. And as we go on, he starts to bring in some effects pedals and things like that. But that's pretty much what I have to say about it. I mean, lyrically, it's kind of a typical, you're looking at typical sort of blues lyrics. It's kind of funny if you think about it. Well, we'll wait for Lazy Poker to talk about it.
We'll get there.
Yeah, we'll get there.
Tony.
I mean, you did a great job with the guitar. The only thing I've ever read about is guitar. I mean, I'm not a guitarist, so I don't follow my uncle is and my brother is, and they both worship Green. But mutilated Les Paul, that's what I'd heard that he'd worked with, but I don't know how it was mutilated, so I don't know. But the sound, what I love about this tune is that it is so clear. The sound is so clear, despite the fact that some of the album sounds deliberately muddy. This sounds so clear, and the tempo is like really well kept up the whole way through. And in terms of songs, it's probably the least neurotic Peter Green song in his entire category. It's like the most ordinary Peter Green tune, like the most anyone could have sung this. But it's a great tune. Love it.
Are you saying that not anyone could have sang the Green Melodishi or whatever it's called? I was gonna call Nick. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I find that this is one of the weaker songs on the album. Green's voice in particular sounds very thin on the record, and we don't really have that issue on the other tracks. I'm curious as to why that is the case. I don't have too many other thoughts on the song in particular, so we can probably just move on.
I'd blame it on Clifford Davis. I'm gonna blame everything.
I'm pretty sure Mike Vernon was the producer.
Oh, Mike Vernon.
I think Clifford Davis was the manager, if I'm not mistaken.
And songwriter.
Oh, yes.
Jim.
Yes. Okay. Like the previous song, this doesn't break much new ground. Nevertheless, it's a very enjoyable mid-tempo song. It's a little cut below what other Peter Green's on this album. It doesn't kind of stick in your memory like some of the others, but it's good.
All right. I just mentioned something about the vocal. Nick, maybe it's because he's trying for a higher range. He's deliberately shouting.
Hey, that's
parts of this.
Might be using his head voice as opposed to his chest voice.
Well, it's not a what do you call what do we call head voice?
Falsetto.
It's not a falsetto, but he's definitely going at the higher range of his his chest voice, and it sounds like he's deliberately straining it. So it's a different kind of vocal attack.
Yeah, I think, and it almost sounds, if the music weren't, the way that it is, I would almost feel like sounds like the tape is sped up a little bit. Because that's gonna raise the pitch, but the rest of the band sounds normal and that sort of slow, gritty, plodding swing. But his voice, I agree, it sounds a little bit strained, and I think it takes away some of his baritone timbre.
He pulled a Stevie Nicks The Dealer 2014 version and just shouted at the top of his range. All right. We have our first. Is this our first Fleetwood Mac instrumental? There's many to come. The Sunny Side of Heaven. Danny's Chant, kind of.
Yeah.
Others that will be
Gray, a million of them, yeah.
Yep, Earl Grey. But here we have Evening Boogie, which I said was a great Spencer instrumental jam. To me, it was kind of 50s rock and roll. Great horns and sax. It's kind of cooking. Tony, why don't you start this one off?
I always enjoyed it, but then maybe it's because I enjoyed the difference.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if it's a great tune, but it's different than his other stuff on the album. So it's kind of, and I love the tempo. I love the playfulness of it. And I love the horns. I love the horns in it. So
it's interesting because on Kiln House, he really went, exploring some of those 50s kind of throwback things. So, Nick, what did you think of this one?
Well, I have a very big soft spot for instrumentals, so this was one of my favorites on the album. Just super locked in the groove. No complaints about it whatsoever. I would probably play it again.
Okay. Jim Miller.
Yes. Yes, a nice little danceable band jam. Reminds me of the Allman Brothers work. It just somehow reminds me of that. A higher, more prominent guitar riff added in it would have made this a better instrumental. If there was just another guitar, I don't know, on the high end, a higher pitch, it probably would have been a real spectacular track. But this is good. It's nice little, their first instrumental, and just a nice little jam.
Sam, what were your thoughts on this one?
I think it's a very refreshing, almost little interlude that comes in a little over halfway through the album. I love it. I think it's a perfect addition and a great effort by Spencer. And also, I love the sax playing.
And even with the sequencing of the album, if they would have put this at the beginning of the side and kind of broke up the songs that sounded the same, even that would have been of a service to the album, in my opinion. All right, so Lazy Poker Blues. When I was listening to this, the lyrics, me and my baby just lay around. It kind of reminded me of the first album. That first album was so misogynistic, like my girl, my little girl, there are all these little girls. I felt like I'm glad that did not carry over to this album as bad as it was the first time around. Great Christine piano. Christine sounds like she's having a lot of fun. I loved this one. Jim, let's have you start off this one.
Okay. Yeah, it's a fun, up-tempo song with very suggestive lyrics. By the title, I thought it was about playing cards. I don't think I've heard or played this very much until like last couple weeks. They said, Lazy Poker Blues, is it talking about just sitting around drinking and card? No, it's a little bit more involved in that.
Mm-hmm.
And a good showcase of this band's talent. So that's
Sam, let's go to you.
Yeah, it's great piano playing. That's one thing I remember listening more for today. When this one came on, I noticed the piano playing was I don't know enough about Jerry Lee Lewis, but it was definitely that style, that Johnny Johnson, barrel house rock style piano, and I thought that's fantastic. I mean, there's some cooking live versions of this. One thing that I meant to mention earlier, I double checked, but it was Worried Dream was the song that it's on that compilation, the
The
compilation.
original.
Yes, yeah. It's a BB King song, and that's actually what they played at the BBC that was lost or destroyed or whatever. But it's very similar to Love That Burns. It's almost like Love That Burns is Peter Green's version of Worried Dream. So I want to make that clear from earlier. But Lazy Poker Blues is, I mean, by all accounts, these guys were fun, and you've got that sort of adolescent sense of humor a little bit there. Actually, a colleague of mine, he's a radio DJ at the local college, University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, WUTC. His name's Richard Wynnum. I told him I was going to be on this podcast because he is from London, and he's about 72, and he saw this lineup of the band in England in the late 60s, and he said they were a riot, and nothing could top them from this period. So I know Lazy Poker Blues was a song that they played a lot, and it just must have been phenomenal to be able to experience that.
It's so crazy that they got so huge with Rumors, because they were huge in a whole different version in a whole different time and space. How many bands does that happen with? I guess Genesis has different eras. The Doobie Brothers has like the early, then the Michael McDonald era. But, Fleetwood Mac's definitely awesome. Who have I not called on yet for this one? Nick.
Not a lot of thoughts on this one either. It's a very peppy composition, one of the fastest tempos on the entire album. Kind of going back to Peter Green's guitar sound in particular, I was looking at Fleetwood Mac on Fleetwood Mac Interviews and Encounters, which was a book, I think, compiled by Sean Egan, and came across this interview. I think Snowy White and a bunch of other people who worked with Peter Green were interviewed for this. It was back in 1994. So they just compiled a bunch of articles and then placed it in this book. And apparently the issue with the guitar was that the pickups were changed and put back out of phase. That was the primary issue, and it created kind of this very fluty sound almost. I think Green lamented that the guitar tone was something that he actually wasn't satisfied with, but I think they were asking about his magic guitar, and he said there was nothing magic about it. It was just broken.
Oh, shit. All right. Did I miss anybody? All right, Tony.
Yeah, I just I love this tune. I love this tune. And all of its imperfections, but I think that again it's a triumph of the rhythm section. It's Mick, John, and Christine. And I mean everything else is great too. And I love the double entendre in the lyrics, but it's a great piece. But it arrives at the right time in the album when you want to pick up, which is good. I did want to mention the Worried Dream thing that Sam had mentioned. It's one of my favorite tracks that they never used on an album. And that has amazing Christine piano on it. Amazing. And John, who can't be here tonight, he and I have a long Worried Dream joke. Aww. So it's like you'll often find if you listen to the recordings, they got where they ask him to do a take, and then Peter Green gets pissed that they have to do another take, and so he goes, and Vernon says rolling, and Peter Green in a very kind of infantile way says stagecoach, and so if you ever look on the ledge, occasionally John and I'll just out of nowhere I'll just write stagecoach.
Oh, nice.
What's your handle on there?
T. Liuzzi, it's very creative. T. Liuzzi. But I didn't know back at the time that we could do anything other than our names. I've been on there for ages, but
I didn't know anyone did anything on the ledge but slaughter Stevie Nicks every 2 seconds.
Oh yeah, there's a guy on there that just, oh my God.
Anyway, back to much love to everybody. Much love to everybody. Coming home. Well, we really are coming home because that riff's back again.
Yeah.
Oh no, not that riff again. And wasn't there a Fleetwood Mac song called "Coming Home" on "Heroes Are Hard to Find"? So,
Yeah.
and one called "Angel," right? So, which was later on Tusk. So I guess "Heroes Are Hard to Find" was the album where.
And then Without You, they had that on Then Play On, and then later on the EP.
All right, so any thoughts on? I have nothing to say.
I'll give it to him.
Go ahead, Jim.
Yes, very much like the other Elmore James covers. It is a good update on the original, but it's too similar to the rest of Jeremy's efforts on this album. It's just, repeat, rinse and repeat. But it's a good track, but it's, another one of the same. And okay.
Tony, I saw your hand. No. Nick?
You can essentially copy paste all of my comments from the previous 3 songs, or the 3 Spencer songs. But if I had to rank them all, I would probably put Dust May Broom as number 1, probably Need Your Love Tonight, number 2, Dr. Brown 3, and then probably this one 4th. I would probably switch this one, Dr. Brown, depending on my mood. But yeah, these 2 are probably at the bottom.
I'm putting everyone on the spot here. Can anyone think of an album where 4 songs sound so similar? Like I can't even think of anything off the top of my head, and that's all I listen to is music. Well,
anything off of AC/DC's entire discography, maybe.
What about a Elmore James greatest hits?
Elmore James. Hey, this is something I don't do in public very often, but did you know that I can do the whole Metallica discography in 5 seconds? Are you guys ready?
Yes.
Yeah, no. There you go.
Pretty impressive.
All right, Sam. Yeah, no.
Are we talking about Coming Home still?
Yeah, Coming Home.
Honestly, when I listened to this, I listened a couple weeks ago, and then I listened to the whole album again this morning, and I got about halfway through, and I skipped to the next song on this one. I mean, it was. I just did. There's not. It's goes back to my original comment of it does a disservice really to the performance. And I'm looking at I've got the original Fleetwood Mac. This is the 2000 pressing by Snapper Music. And I'm looking at the first 12 songs, which are all credited to being produced by Vernon. So I would have to go back and listen to these songs and pick out, okay, that's Christine, so it seems like, alluding to what Tony said here, that probably Worried Dream was from these sessions.
Okay.
So what other Jeremy Spencer songs do we have here? I know he sings Mean Old Fireman, but what else did they have that they could have cobbled something together from? Because they probably went in the studio for a day, maybe 2 days, and knocked this all out live, and then had a collection of material to put forth to satisfy the album's requirements. And not knowing all the fine details of that, I think, it might have been just, this is what we have to do. This is what we have to use.
Yeah, that's why I'm convinced that there's a certain bit of provocation here on his part. Like, let's just do it and see if I can get away with it. I don't know, because there had to be other material he could have used.
He was punking us.
I found a couple of songs, I believe, in that Blue Horizons compilation album. There are 2 songs, I Held My Baby Last Night, which is an Elmore James cover, and then there's another song titled Mystery Boogie.
Yeah. And Mystery Boogie is actually used on a compilation album called The Vintage Years. Years later.
That's the one with like the car on the cover, right?
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, the album wraps up with a slow Peter Green song. The harmonica has shown up. The harmonica is here. Trying so hard to forget. Track 6, track 7, track 11.
Track 12.
Sam, what do you think of Trying So Hard to Forget?
I think it echoes the closing number from the first record, if I'm not mistaken, in a way where you've got this raunchy blues band, and then actually, no, am I right about that or no, it's
You're right.
that closes the side one of the first record, I guess, right? Is it Looking for Somebody or World Keeps
the
Turning?
World Keeps on Turning.
Oh
is the
yeah, World
ballad
Keeps
track.
it. That's what I'm thinking of. World Keeps on Turning. But you've got a great closing song, and for someone who is known for his prowess on guitar, there's no lead guitar here. This is a very subdued sort of rhythm guitar, and I think it's Duster Bennett. Is that right? That plays, yeah. And the Duster Bennett stuff is really cool, and as far as I know, he was a sort of a one-man band. I had to seek out his album years and years ago. I sought out one of his albums from this period, and it was fascinating. Because now the one-man band is a very common thing. You see it all the time, but back then I don't know. I don't know how common it was, and I thought he was a great songwriter and obviously a great harmonica player.
Well, Jim, what are your notes on this one?
Okay. Peter Green puts a lot of emotion into this. This is a taste of Green's troubled mind going forward. This is really and truly the blues. This is, it goes into, man of the world type stuff by Peter Green. And, it's pretty deep kind of stuff. And this is kind of the first taste of that.
All right.
Of the later records.
Nick, what are your thoughts on this one?
One word: boring.
Oh shit!
Ouch!
All right.
I'm just gonna give you a visit tonight.
Well, I'm gonna send Clifford Davis over to your house. All right. Well, Tony, I feel like you have to leave us soon, so that's why I saved you for last.
I can. I've been drinking hibiscus tea to keep my energy up.
Oh,
I had a really raging headache at the beginning, and now I'm okay, so I can stay through it.
the first time a man has ever said that me talking took away his headache. Well,
it was the hibiscus tea. But
okay. We'll blame on the tea. All right.
Actually, I'm actually really impressed too with how much everyone knows here. This is awesome. This is one of my favorite tunes on the album. It's
Nick, did you hear that?
It's authentic. It's authentic in the way that a lot of the stuff on the first album was. It has tonally, it's a lot like that, but obviously Christine's not on it. It's so spare. So I felt like, as impressive as it is, and it is a beautiful piece, I just love it. It didn't feel like it was aligned with the rest of the spirit of the album. It felt like it was a holdover from the first album, brought over, even though that's probably not what happened. It just felt that way, because the rest of the album is so full with a lot of instrumentation. But I love it. I think it's a beautiful tune. Very melancholy, beautiful.
I will compliment the harmonica playing, though. I will give it that the instrumentation's fine enough just with the harmonica. Other than that, I suppose it's a little below average for me. Sorry.
Well, that's nice of you. We've finished up Mr. Wonderful, Mr. Mostly Wonderful, but we still have more to talk about. Now, I did a little bit of research here. Wrap your head around this. These days, an artist comes out with an album once every 3 years. Mr. Wonderful came out in August 68. English Rose in December 68 in the US. Then Pious Bird in August 69, followed 1 month later by Then Play On. So from August 68 to September 69, 13 months, you have these 4 Fleetwood Mac albums.
Blues Jam came out in December of 69 as well, but that was recorded in January.
So imagine getting, some bands could never do this much in their whole career. They did this in 13 months. And let's also mention, Christine wasn't even a member of the damn band yet. She was she married to John yet, or was she just working her way towards being married to John? Was she perfect or McVie?
She was still perfect on the album.
She was still perfect on the album.
Christine's always perfect to us.
By the time they get to Them Play On, she's married.
So Mr. Wonderful did not come out in the United States, and it's interesting because as being a big Fleetwood Mac fan, that's the album that I discovered the longest. I didn't even know it existed. I knew about the Dustbin album, I knew about Then Play On Forward, but I didn't know about Mr. Wonderful. And then I always truly thought that English Rose was the proper second Fleetwood Mac album, and of course, it wasn't. It's a compilation between some songs from Mr. Wonderful. There's a song from the first album, right? Some B-sides. Does anybody have any really good knowledge about what exactly this compilation is made up of?
It's some of their singles. It's some of their singles, like it's got Black Magic Woman and Albatross on it. It's got Jeremy's best tunes from the first two albums. And then it's got Danny Kerwin pieces.
So Danny Kerwin has entered the picture. I am a big Danny Kerwin fan. Talk about I do love my tortured men. I love them. I love them, and this is right on brand with Jeremy
Do you
Gloff.
like blondes? Is that it?
I do. I think Danny Kerwin's sexy. When I'm on the Blondie podcast, Jimmy Destry, the keyboard player, I'm like, if I could be with anyone, it'd be Jimmy Destry or Danny Kerwin. Like 1971, like when he smashed the guitar through the wall, I've been like, oh, Danny. Anyway, back to the podcast. Speaking of things that bend the gender norms, we have Mick Fleetwood here.
Yeah.
He was naked on the last album cover. Now we got Mick in drag. I mean, I feel like Mick just looked forward to the album covers more than anything else. We're gonna go over the songs that have not appeared on other albums. So we have 6 songs here that are unique to English Rose. Jigsaw Puzzle Blues opens the album.
Okay.
Instrumental. In the introduction of Danny Kerwin. Is that how you pronounce it? Kerwin? Rest in peace. He died a few years ago. He was homeless or unhoused, however you want to say it, for many years. I always had a dream that he would like get himself together and pick up the guitar and get up on stage and make the comeback, and it never happened. There's so many things that never happened. Like the Pointer Sisters never got back together with June. Donna Summer, passed away. I always thought Prince was going to come back and make that one more masterpiece, and that never happened. Unless you consider, well, anyway, that's a whole nother podcast. But I always thought Danny would get back on stage, and he never did. So what do you guys think of Jigsaw Puzzle Blues? Who wants to start this one off?
I'll do it.
Okay, Jim.
Yes. Now, of course, Danny Kerwin penned this instrumental, and this is weird. I swear I heard this when I was watching a cartoon animation when I was very young, like 6, 7, 8 years old, kind of when this song music came out. And I vaguely remember that a cat was in the cartoon. This may have been my first exposure to Fleetwood Mac. It has some Beatle-esque textures here. I like the harsher guitar tone later towards the end of the song, instrumental. A very cool instrumental to this day.
Now, just for a little background, wasn't the motivation of bringing Kerwin into the band to kind of have a foil for Peter Green to kind of play off of? It's interesting because Jeremy Spencer got kind of left off some of the songs after Danny joined, especially on Then Play On. And he was in the band Boiler House, right? Mick went to the shows and was impressed by this young guitarist. And the rest is history. Nick, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, everything you said there is correct. I think Spencer had some reservations about playing on Green's material just because he felt that it would have been stepping on Green's toes a little bit. He felt that Green's material was sufficient without him on it. And if you listen to the studio recordings, it's actually pretty rare to hear Spencer and Green playing on the same songs. It's usually just Green, McVie, and Fleetwood, or Spencer, McVie, and Fleetwood on these songs. But now you actually get those dueling guitars, and that interplay is very much present and much appreciated, especially on Then Play On. And here, I think I'm trying to think of who did the lead guitar. I would assume that it was Kerwin. Green is doing some amazing rhythmic support on here. I think Green is a bit underrated as a rhythm guitarist. He's very competent in that role and just providing very necessary support to the songs where needed. Very versatile player, and that helps very much on this composition. It's a bit of a throwaway. It's a nice filler track. It was recorded as a B-side. I think it's okay, but certainly nothing groundbreaking.
I do feel like Danny held his own though, next to the Green God. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, this is good.
Well,
It certainly improves. This is probably one of his weaker compositions in comparison to what he'll do later on, especially when we get to Bare Trees, once we get to future games. Even
can't argue with
Then
that.
Play On, he really blossoms on even Then Play On too. It's almost night and day.
all right, who'd like to go next? Tony, go ahead.
I love this tune, and you know, when you were talking about hearing it in our cartoon, Jim, is a very good chance that you might not have heard this, but it sounded like this was firmly pinned or based on a Django Reinhardt tune.
Okay.
So, which was from the 40s or the early 50s.
Right.
And so he basically rewrote it or reconceptualized it for him for a 4-piece.
Okay.
And so, you know, even though Django Reinhardt's not getting credit for it, a lot of the original writers never got credit for their tunes. I think this is at best a co-write.
Except for Clifford Davis.
Yeah. But
I can't let it go.
I love the piece. It's showing Danny playing the way he played before he really entered Fleetwood Mac. It's a very thick kind of guitar sound, which he kind of abandoned. I mean, he kind of changed his style within a year or two of joining the band. But you get to hear, you know, they used to call him Ragtime Cowboy Country Joe or something.
Yeah,
Ragtime Cowboy Joe. My grandpa used to actually sing that song.
Yeah, so there you go. So they used to call him that, but it was partly because he was so eclectic, and that he had that kind of sound, that kind of big band 40s and 50s sound.
Yeah.
And it's and this is really what he was kind of doing before he joined. So
okay, good.
And Django or whatever was that's the instrumental on Buckingham Nicks, right? That Lindsay paid.
Django Reinhardt's like one of the premier guitarists of the 20th century, and you know, a lot of people have to come to terms with him when they're playing guitar. You know?
So it's interesting through the chain of Fleetwood Mac, though some of the same influences keep making appearances. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, it's a remarkable little piece. It just shows the window of what's going to go forward, like one of you guys said. Just there's a lot of nuance to it, and just the melodicness to it. Kerwin just add the melodicness to this band.
Yeah.
Probably, like you may say, this might be one of his weaker pieces, but it's Danny Kerwin. You know, it's just the start of what we were going to see later.
He could do so many. You know, my favorite Danny Kerwin song. You guys probably. I love that damn Ram Jam City from his solo album.
Yeah,
it's just like the best melody. I put that on and just feels so good, and he's sexy. Okay, Sam, save this podcast because I'm just losing my. Here.
No, I honestly like. I would be surprised. I'd have to listen to it again, but I would be surprised if Peter Green does play on this. Okay, yeah. And I think, you know, it's trademark Danny Kerwin, that's almost neurotic sounding vibrato in the guitar playing. And fantastic composer. And I was going to say, I thought that this was based on a Django Reinhardt song, but it does have that sort of big band 1930s, you know, stuff that my grandparents listened to, vibe to it. And now one thing is that I meant to do, I feel like it was a couple years ago, they came out with some old Boiler House recordings that surfaced like maybe a couple years ago, and I meant to look into those and listen to those because I've always wondered what they sounded like versus you know, how he adapted and played with Fleetwood Mac. I believe I did read that, we'll get to this next, but something inside of me was was one of the songs that I think carried over from the Boiler House era. But Jigsaw Puzzle Blues it's funny, it's quirky. I mean, like if you bought that album or the single Albatross, you know, you've got Albatross on one side and you got Jigsaw Puzzle Blues on the other side, and think about, oh, you've got, you know, the original Fleetwood Mac album and Mr. Wonderful, and then you buy these two records and you're like, what happened to my band?
Yeah.
But it's just shows their versatility. And yes, Danny Kerwin's melody, his sense of melody, and his harmony, really too. He was an incredible. I think his mom was a singer. Is that right, or something like that?
I feel like I've heard that before.
Yeah, his mother was like a classically trained singer, and I can't say enough good things about his musicianship and his playing abilities and his versatility.
It just blows my mind that there was a period in time when Christy McVie, Bob Welch, and Danny Kerwin were in the same band. Like, I know that only lasted for a couple albums, but I mean, to me, that's like, I always get chills thinking about it, because that is like my heroes, like the legends. The universe is colliding. So that's why, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and yeah, you know, like what somebody had mentioned, it might have been Nick, I think, that said that Jeremy Spencer never felt the need to play on Peter Green's songs. But if you look at Kiln House and I think Purple Dancer was like a B-side or something during that time. You've got Danny Kerwin and Jeremy Spencer playing together, and they sound great.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, this podcast from this point on through the end of this season, it's just classic after classic. I mean, I love all these albums. I'm probably going to get teary-eyed because there's been I spent more time with these albums than any human being, probably. And more time with these albums than Rumors, for sure.
I did want to say, you know, because Nick had mentioned the comping in the background, or the green rhythm. I believe Danny Kerwin, what do you call it? Dubbed all of his parts for it. That's what I'd heard, that he had dubbed all the parts for it. But it could be that, I mean, it could be that Green is actually playing on it, but I believe that it's all Danny Kerwin doing it.
And Christy
I wasn't able to find too much information on that song in particular, so you very well might be right. I assume that it was simply the usual configuration, but I'll give it to you on that.
The first example we get of what you're talking about, Nick, is on Albatross. That's where they really play together.
Christ.
Very much so.
And of course, Christy McVie in her McVie fashion about Danny Kerwin. He was an odd fellow. Like, that's all she had to say. All right. Well, we get Danny's first vocals, Something Inside of Me, a slow Kerwin blues. First time we hear Danny sing on a Fleetwood Mac album. What do you guys think of the song?
I mean, it shows that here's this guy who, you know, he looked like a kid.
He was a kid.
Yeah, and he could play excellent guitar, and
oh my god,
sung great. He's got that voice in sort of the traditional, almost English sort of voice, you know.
Yeah.
Nobody's gonna mistake him from coming from the south side of Chicago, you know. but that's his interpretation of the blues, and that doesn't mean that it wasn't authentic to him as a person, as a player, and as an artist. And you know, his vibrato at that age blows away people who've been playing for, you know, 40 years or whatever. Yeah. But yeah, great song. And I think, you know, this record, this English Rose, just looking at the track listing, you can tell, I think I read that the original album, when it was released in the US, didn't do that well. So it seems like they kind of were like, let's not just release Mr. Wonderful. Let's put some singles on here. Let's take some of the best songs that we think from Mr. Wonderful and some of these B-sides and rarities, and really present a solid package the next time we hit the States with a product.
Nick?
I will say, yeah, Mr. Wonderful wasn't released in the United States. This was essentially the replacement album, and I believe it actually did perform better than the first album. We were discussing how the first album hit 198 on the charts and how we thought it was so hilarious. This one, I think, hit 184 on the charts, so they're creeping up the charts each time, and eventually they'll reach number one, I think, the 10th album in.
All right. Gentlemen, forgive me. I'm very tired, so I may forget who I've called on, but we're gonna I didn't want to reschedule this. I really wanted to do this tonight with you guys. So,
Okay.
Jim.
Yes, this is when Fleetwood Mac started to move away the basic Chicago blues. I can see why Danny was brought into the band. Danny with a terrific vocal. This has a Big Brother and Holding Company vibe to it. I'm more familiar with the live version that I had on cassette. There was like the Boston Tea Party, one of their tapes I had, and I played the shit out of it. I played it and played it and played it because it was just so, like alive. Their live stuff is they did well in the studio. They were more focused on being a live act. They would just say, "Oh, it's time to record. Okay, we'll just get some beer and and sit down and lay down a track or two." And they did it well, but there's just something about their live performances. Like It This Way, I play a lot just because it's a banger. It's killer. It's what is it? Is it three guitars or two? Is it Danny where Danny breaks his string, and keeps going, and Peter going along with them, and Mick and John just killing it. And that was Fleetwood Mac back then. Mm-hmm. And that's why they were just a great live act to watch. And like someone mentioned here that he knows someone that saw him live, and that must have been a treat.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that 60s era where everything kind of goes, it was open-ended and having fun and I'm glad these live clips are still around, kicking around. And that's what even though these from this era until like them play on, but that was the most impressive part of this band back then is the live shows like the Playboy shows and all those.
All right, Tony, did I call on you already? I didn't, right?
Yeah, but it's okay. I love the piece because it's a strict 12-bar blues, but his voice makes it something else.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, he's got the voice of a folk singer, and he's got this guitar playing that is just like, if you took the voice out, you wouldn't know who it was. I mean, you'd mistake it for Chicago blues any day of the week. It's a very distinctive guitar sound, but then he's got this really unusual voice, which kind of pushes the band away by necessity. It pushes them, even when they're doing 12-bar blues, it makes their identity a little different.
Right.
And apparently he was a big heartthrob for the girls. The girls liked him.
Not only the girls.
No, but I'm just like, it was like the big, he was like the girls would like run around and oh, Danny kind of thing. So.
I would have been right with them.
Yeah.
I feel like these compilations are the bridge between, because if you listen to Mr. Wonderful and then play on, that makes no damn sense. But with these compilations in there kind of as a bridge, you kind of get a little bit of a feel of where we're going.
They used to issue a lot of singles.
Yeah.
And so those singles functioned as the bridge.
Any other thoughts on this song? Did I miss anybody?
I was just going to say it was when he first joined the band, it was what he would play live. That and actually Like It This Way. Looking at the old set lists and some of my old bootlegs, this was kind of Danny's song that he brought to the table when they played live and when he first joined in fall of '68.
All right, well, next. Of course, I mean, here we are. We got to talk about this one. Made famous by Santana in an arrangement that sounded more like that one song from the first album. But we have Black Magic Woman. The Fleetwood Mac version, of course, I heard the Santana version. I didn't even know that was a Fleetwood Mac song when I was a kid. You go back and find out it's a Fleetwood Mac song. The first time I heard it, the tempo change took me off guard. It's an interesting take on the song. I mean, this is the original version. What do you guys think of Black Magic Woman, the Fleetwood Mac version?
I love it. I don't think Santana gets anywhere near it.
Oh, wow.
As much as I love the Santana orchestration that they do and the kind of Latin rhythms they bring to it, This is
Doing.
this has got real power to it, and it's just like it's really got real power to it that it feels so damn authentic, and I love it. And the drums, if you notice the drums,
They're very
I
tribal.
love it because it's a kind of similar drumming that he uses in Go Your Own Way during the verses. The kind of like the tom-toms against the rhythm. I love it.
First we have Black Magic Woman, then Gold Dust Woman. I mean, there's all these just crazy women in this discography. Right, well, Sam, what do you think of this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Santana chickened out and changed the lyric of one of the most important lyrics in the song. Break off my magic stick. He changed it to pick up my magic sticks. They changed it. I mean, come on. And of course, Peter's girlfriend, what was her name? Sandy
Sandra
Mary.
Eldson.
Yeah, she said, well, of course we know what his magic stick was, right? But no, I love it. And actually, to me, I really wish that because I always listen to the rhythm guitar on this, and I've always like, did they do that after the fact? Or was it actually Jeremy Spencer? The rhythm guitar on the single version, it sounds like it's probably plugged directly into the board. It's just not a super great tone. So, but otherwise, it's a fantastic song. The drums are amazing. The bass is great, and of course, Peter Green's contributions to his song are mind blowing. But I love personally the stuff when they played it in '70, right before Peter left the band, when Danny Kerwin's playing the rhythm part, and there's that the May 1970 version in London, like one of Peter Green's last shows, where he plays the solo with a wah pedal, and it's like otherworldly. I mean, to me, those are my favorite versions of it, and I think he said maybe on the Tea Party, we tried this once or twice when I first wrote it, and it never worked. But now we've got it together, so here we go. And they just, I mean, just the way I feel like that song reached its pinnacle was with Danny Kerwin and Peter Green playing it together. But still, I love it, this version as well.
Did they do a version of this on the 2019 tour?
Yes.
Mike Campbell?
Yes.
Stevie Nicks sang it.
It was not the finest moment.
But Christine played, and she was actually playing, and she played her solos.
Yeah.
And so that was at least an evidence that Christine could still play in 2019. So,
all right, Jim, what are your notes?
Yes, I love the spooky guitar intro, that ching. That's great. Yeah, Fleetwood Mac coming into their own, yet still grounded in the blues. I love the passionate ending. Santana picked up on this and made a monster hit out of it. I mean, when I bought these older things and Black Magic Woman's on this. I think I was heard that Fleetwood Mac was the original, and then when I got to playing it, I thought, wow, this is really a departure, and I'm going to have to because I'm so used to the Santana version that I said, wow, I mean, this is going to be a bit getting used to, but that lead, that blues lead, that's what Santana uses, the same riff. That is so legendary in music, that riff. It's amazing.
I would say it's a very Otis Rush influenced style, that kind of minor blues that Otis Rush was really great at.
Well, Nick, had you heard this version before? Did you know that Fleetwood Mac did this?
Yeah, I was familiar with all the singles.
Okay.
This was actually their very first one to break through on the UK charts. It hit number 37, and then each time they would improve. I think Need Your Love So Bad at 31. Albatross, I think that was next. That hit number 1.
Right.
And we'll get to that later. And I know for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame performance, Green was actually invited to play on stage with Santana. So that performance is certainly worth watching.
Okay.
I think in the Then Play On autobiography that Mick Fleetwood wrote about, I think in 2015, he mentioned kind of the background behind the performance and how Santana was essentially trying to urge him to take more of a solo. And you can actually see this in the video of how Santana's prodding him to be more prominent in the mix, and Green's trying to turn his volume down because he wants to take a back seat and try not to steal the spotlight. He could have had the opportunity to play with Fleetwood Mac, but I think he only wanted to prioritize one performance, seeing that both Santana and Fleetwood Mac, they were nominated for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame the exact same year, in 1998. It would have been cool to see Peter Green playing on stage with Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham, but unfortunately we never had the chance to see that. I think for that performance, Jeremy Spencer was away, and then Danny Kerwin couldn't be contacted. So even though those 8 members were all nominated, it was pretty much the Rumors 5 that played on stage with their backing band.
And Bob Wells totally got the shaft, right? They didn't.
He was shafted.
I remember that was a big uproar on the community, rightfully so.
Deservedly so. It was terrible. It was terrible.
Yeah.
But I do have to say that of Black Magic Woman, Sam was talking about how the song grew live, and it became. This song was like a major staple of the band up until 74. I mean, Lindsey wouldn't play it, but all the way up to 74. And it really, you can even hear in Bob Welsh's guitar solos on How Heroes Are Hard to Find, but also live on the soundboards, that he was really influenced by the guitar on this song. You can hear he's really trying to duplicate a Green chord. It's fascinating.
And there's some really cool Bob Welch, Danny Kerwin versions of this out there.
Yeah. From like 71, 72, there's been, and the band, the way the band just like stretches it out.
All right. Well, the next couple songs are on Then Play On, so we're going to save that for next month. Go ahead, Jim.
That was the 98 Hall of Fame with Santana and Fleetwood Mac and the Eagles. That was a missed thing where just stick Stevie Nicks in front of the not with just fronting the friggin' Eagles for once, because she can sing that stuff.
Yeah,
she can. One of these nights or something, just do it. And that was just so missed. That was such a missed thing.
She's like, I need to get to the studio and
that would have been
the Practical Magic soundtrack.
That would have been legendary. Stevie just goes up there because she's confident and she's badass and she knows the Eagles more in ways than one.
Oh, geez.
But just go out there in front of the mic, Eagles backing, because Ronstadt was in front of the Eagles too, and just blow it away, and just like mic drop. You're done. You do one friggin' Eagles song. I don't care what it was. Boom. And it was missed. That was a missed opportunity.
A lot of missed opportunities at that 98
oh, man,
Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
That was a banging bunch to go in all at once.
Well, I'm about to show my skills as a podcast host. What was not a missed opportunity was the next song we're going to discuss, which was the first #1 single from Fleetwood Mac. Am I correct? The instrumental Albatross.
Okay.
I mean, how does one even put into words
the
magic and power of this song? I listened to it and actually got tears in my eyes yesterday. I mean, it's just so... To go from that first album, then Mr. Wonderful. I mean, there's some great cooking moments on those, but Albatross, man. Like, Sam, I feel like you got to start this one off.
Well, it's funny. I think that, it's in a way probably Peter Green's maybe most revered song. Of course, he never, unfortunately, became as popular in the United States as I think he could have or should have. But I actually anticipated, everybody talking about the guitar and the composition and the Santo and Johnny influence. But I really think that John McVie's bass on this song is almost like prophetic to some of the songs that they had in even the Buckingham Nicks. This is like we're busting out of the blues totally here.
Yeah.
This sold from anybody young to old. By what I've read about this song is that it's a cross-generational song. And then I think they even released it, a few years later after he quit, and it went way up the charts over in England.
1973, they released it again.
Number 2. Almost hit number 1 again for the second time.
I mean, you can't, I mean, what can you say about it? It's just, he wrote something that touched a lot of people and moved a lot of people.
I also want to give a shout out to Mick Fleetwood's sublime cymbal work. You know what I mean? Like, just
That's the way he's
so
crashed.
delicate, such a delicate drumming from Fleetwood. And who knew that they all had this in them? You know what I mean?
The mallets he's using.
Yeah,
Tiffany mallets, if I'm not mistaken, and he had some towels, if I'm not mistaken, on the floor tom to have a nice thud without any resonance whatsoever on that drum.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, that guitar, just the tone. It's just it's otherworldly, honestly.
And there's a lot of room for Danny in it too. He gives a lot of room away. And so you hear both guitarists and both of their signature sounds in it, which is just beautiful. I must admit though, I first heard this when I was like 12 years old. And I was shocked. I was like, what the hell is this? You know, because when you're 12 years old, at least when I was 12 years old, everything was like all, you mentioned AC/DC earlier and, and there was all kinds of like, I was listening to Jefferson Starship kind of stuff, that kind of thing. So then you listen to this and it's like, what? And now as very quickly I realized that this was the stuff. This was yeah.
Well, Tony, I'm going to one-up you. When I was 10 years old, I was listening to rock a little. So I didn't know what the hell to do with this here.
I'm sorry.
I was too busy with Sister Honey to be bothered with this Albatross shit. But joking aside.
I saw her live for Rock a Little, by the way. I saw her live.
Well, that's more than we saw in the Red Rocks video because all that was not live. Back to Albatross. Jim, did I already call it? Do you have your notes?
Yes, so beautiful. The band may have come across some like Hawaiian music, like Don Ho, like what's the little
ukulele?
guitar? Yeah, ukulele. That kind of reminds me of that kind of tone, that kind of playing. It reminds me of that. This is such a departure from early Fleetwood Mac, very melodic. The beginning of the Fleetwood Mac melodic era. And you hear it and you're in the ocean. You're just there. It's one of those songs that it's like, it brings like nature, it's music that emulates nature. It's kind of one and the same.
So you feel like you can see this song? Like you can see this.
Yes.
It's going to look different to each of us.
A big old, an albatross flying and what do they scoop fish like a pelican, or I don't know they got a large wingspan, and they're supposed to be able to fly for days and go from, I don't know, from island to island. And it's just such a relaxed, beautiful song to just listen to.
Well, Nick, what did you think of this one?
So Fleetwood Mac generally had a tendency of releasing their singles separately from the rest of the albums. I know that Green expressed interest in putting songs like Man of the World on, I think then Play On, but I think they decided it was such a departure and was recorded too far away from the album to be included, that there were a couple of variables, and I found that to be a bit of a missed opportunity because you have a lot of these great songs that you had to purchase on its own. That probably increased its sales, but that it came at the expense of maybe a greater exposure. But now we can look them up and enjoy them in their amazing glory that they are. I know for this song, it's one of the few, if not only, songs that actually influenced a Beatles song. I think George Harrison mentioned that they used Albatross for the song Sun King.
Yeah.
Well,
one quick thing that I just thought of. It's kind of funny, people say an albatross, like it's something that, brings you down or, you've got the albatross around your neck. And in a way, not intentionally, ironically, Albatross became that for Peter Green because it was his #1 song. It made him probably the most money of all of his work. And then here he is now, this giant rock star that has all this money that he doesn't want anymore. And it's, I mean, you can't write irony better than that.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, the albatross is often nicknamed the pious bird of good omen. Do you see what I just did there, you guys? This is our third and final compilation before we move on in 2 months to a stellar phase of Fleetwood Mac. I will be honest, I did not get time to go to this one. So the album opens, I'm going to go song by song, and you guys tell me if they're on other albums or unique to this. Need Your Love So Bad.
Yeah, we haven't discussed this song yet. This
Okay.
was one of their first singles that really broke into the mainstream.
Yeah.
I know that Mike Vernon discussed the song in length on the Blue Horizons liner notes on how I believe Kristen McVie was present on the session. She did some great organ work. They actually split up the they plan to release Need Your Love So Bad as a part 1 and a part 2, similar to Oh Well, where I think the original recording is 6 minutes 30 seconds, so they intended to fade in and out maybe the second portion, but then they instead put Stop Messing Around as the B-side to this song instead. I know that Green, and I think the entire band for that matter, really disliked the strings. They thought it sounded as if an elderly crowd of individuals were playing on it.
So did the part 1 and part 2, was it like Oh Well, how the part 2 is totally different, or?
No, it was essentially, well,
Just the same.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with the entire recording. I think the single version is included on this album, but there's one other version that's 6 minutes and 30 seconds. I think it has maybe some other musical passages, maybe another verse or so. It's not like Oh Well, but
It would have been a
it's more so, yes.
continuation.
It would have been a continuation. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay. Any other thoughts on Need Your Love So Bad?
Yeah, actually, this is a very special song to me. It never really was. I mean, I always liked it, and then when I got married, my now wife Michaela suggested that we use this song as our first dance.
Aww.
And that took me completely by surprise because she doesn't, she probably listens to more of the Stevie Nicks era and was more familiar with that era of Fleetwood Mac, but it was one of the best moments of my life. This song is on, and it was her idea. I did not, have any influence in that. And I think, at the time they might have even taken some flack for putting the strings on the song. I think I remember reading that in Strange Brew. If you guys have never seen that book, it's by Christopher, I'll probably mispronounce his last name, Hort. It's Hjort. But anyway, there is a version of this out there that doesn't have, I think it's an alternate version. It doesn't have the strings. But anyway, I think that probably helped propel this, into a bit more, maybe more sales. And I think that the BB King version has strings as well. So I think Peter Green wanted to be authentic to that version, which was what he was modeling it after. But anyway, great song, great playing. And it means a lot to me personally.
Sam, that is so romantic.
Okay.
There's a man out there that wants Ram Jam City to be our first dance. Just like,
Hey, you never know.
you never know. Yes, I do know it's not going to happen. Jim, go ahead. Go ahead with your
Yes.
notes. I know you got some.
This has a more complete production values. This song, it's got like strings in it and a lot of effects, and it's a nice slow dancing song. Me and my wife, when we got this box set, we played it a lot. It was kind of like our courting song before we got married. So
Damn, this song
it's
gets
a
around.
very romantic song.
I'm about to
yes.
log on Grindr and make my
No.
profile Need Your Love So Bad.
Yeah. Did this chart pretty high in the UK?
31, and then it was re-released and it hit 32, so it did
Okay.
pretty well, I suppose.
It was played some, so
Mhm.
it's kind of got like an old school thing to it. When I think of it, I don't know, like older music in the 50s, 40s, 30s, or 20s. Just very good. I mean, it stands out. It really stands out on its own.
All right. Any other thoughts? All right. Coming Home. That was on Mr. Wonderful, right?
I mean,
Yes.
Yep.
yes.
Okay. Rambling Pony. Is that on something else?
Okay.
I think that was a B-side, right?
It's a B-side, and it's also on the original. There's like another version on the original Fleetwood Mac, I think. But
Okay. Anyone want to talk about this one at all, or keep going?
I think there's one version that kind of has chain gang vocals. I'm not sure if it's on this album or if it's a different version, where I think that they had the entire band doing some wordless vocalizations. I think Vernon even jumped in on it. It's a cool song, I suppose.
Well, they recorded an album with Eddie Boyd, so a couple songs from that showed up here. Any thoughts on those? Nope. All right.
Sorry. Were you talking to me? Sorry, I missed that.
No, The Big
Oh.
Boat. Did anybody want to talk about The Big
Oh.
Boat with Eddie Boyd?
I'm not. I was I was kind of reviewing the songs tonight, and I said, "Oh, geez, there's a whole bunch of stuff that we're not going to cover," and that's one of them. And I'm not familiar with it. On Ramblin' Pony, I really like that one, and I really like the live version. It's really a good live Fleetwood Mac from that era. So I really like Ramblin' Pony.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone have? I'm so sorry. I've gotten like 3 hours of sleep in the last 24 hours. Is there any tracks on this that anyone does want to cover? Because I know this is like another compilation. So if there's any songs that anyone wants to mention,
Have we discussed The Sun is Shining yet? I don't think that's been discussed.
nope.
The what?
The Sun is Shining. That's an Elmore James song.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
number 4 track. Who sings it?
Jeremy Spencer.
Jeremy?
Nick, what do you think of that one?
I think it's one of the first early Fleetwood Mac songs that I heard, and I found Jeremy Spencer's voice to be quite a departure from anything that Christine, Lindsay, or Stevie had done. So I was
You're like,
certainly
what the hell is
taken
this?
aback. Exactly. I'm not sure if I was aware that they were a blues band. Maybe I read about it, but I didn't really internalize it yet because I couldn't really conceive the California pop band that I knew of doing anything remotely close to this. But it's certainly a take on Elmore James, I'll tell you that. I'm not sure if I really enjoy it too much, but Jeremy Spencer absolutely was obsessed with Elmore James, and he's great at mimicry.
Oh, right.
It's interesting. The reissue of this album from 2004, it doesn't even have the same track list. I mean,
radically different. It's just Need Your Love So Bad, version 1, Need Your Love So Bad, version 9.
Same cover. They have the picture of the nun with the bird. That's about it.
The Sun is Shining, I think, though, I have to say the guitar in it is fantastic. I have to say that it's really well done. But do I want to hear it? I almost never listen to it. I mean, if I have to listen to it, then all of a sudden I realize why haven't I listened to it more? But it's just really exquisitely done. I believe there's open tunings there, but I just think it's really impressive slide work.
Right. Any other tracks on this compilation that anyone wants to mention? I just wanted to mention it on the podcast because it exists, but
there is some nothing in particular, but I think there is some cool stuff that they did with Eddie Boyd, where he played on some songs that they led, and they backed him up as well on some of the BBC recordings. And actually, if you can find it, there was a recent release of what they called oh man, what was the name of that? It has a blue box. Anyway, it was basically they found a couple bootlegs and they packaged them together and Sony released it. But
was it like the Blue Horizon recordings or something?
No, it was they were, and it was like live demos and outtakes or something. But a few of those songs are from actual BBC recordings, and I'm not sure how the BBC didn't get in there and say, hey, wait a minute, these are our property, or maybe that time is lapsed to do that. But anyway, if you do seek out that bad word bootleg, then there's some cool stuff that they did that hasn't been released, and those tapes could very well be long gone. But Eddie Boyd, I don't know much about him, but I know that they played together and they obviously enjoyed his company.
And I'm definitely a completist, so a lot of things I buy, I listen to. Like I did listen to Pious Bird when I bought it years ago, but I also there's like the compilation, the vaudeville years.
Yes.
What's the other one? There were two of them.
Showbiz Blues. Yeah.
Showbiz Blues.
Yeah.
There's the Boston Tea Party that came like in 3 volumes or 1 volume, however you wanted to buy it. That blue box set that you're talking about. So there's so much material. A lot of it were official releases too. Not all of it was.
And if you're a vinyl fan, they're coming out with. They've got so many live shows on vinyl now that are just like. I mean, you'll have to pay $40 for them, but they're lovely. Lovely live shows. A lot of them are from Norway. A lot of them are, I mean, just great stuff. I do want to mention, you mentioned Eddie Boyd, but also to me, the real collaboration that I just absolutely love is the one with Otis Spawn.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
The biggest thing since Colossus
is
an amazing album. You know, and I like listening to that just as an album, not even related to Fleetwood Mac, but then to have the gift of having Danny Kerwin, John McVie, and I believe it's also Peter Green there as well.
Wow.
Not Mick Fleetwood.
SP Leary plays on it instead, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he didn't want Mick on drums, but that's such an amazing album. So, yeah.
They did a lot of stuff because they were also there. There was that band Tramp that they're on their 2 albums also.
Yeah,
right?
Bob Brunning played with them, I think, for a little bit. I think they had a couple incarnations, released 2 albums total, one in the late 60s and then another maybe even in 1973.
74 was the second one.
74, okay.
Because they were reissued on CD in Japan, and I of course I had to buy them.
And there was in the 74 recording, it's Danny Kerwin and Mick Fleetwood in the same room.
Right, exactly. And I think Bob Brunning, right,
was fired.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What was this?
Tramp. It's called Put a Record On.
Put a Record On. Yep. And they're like, there's a cover. They're like in a diner, right? Like
and it's a good album, but I mean, like if you want to get the original, it's like something like $200 to get the album. But it's they had used Mick and Danny for the first Tramp album, and they wound up calling them back in 1974, and I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. Because when did Danny's first album come out? Was it 75,
I believe it was?
Yeah, I think it was 75.
75.
And then he recorded until 1979. That was his last album, and then he pretty much fell off the face of the earth.
And then the San Juan one was like 77.
Which is the best one, I think.
I love all 3 of the albums, to be honest with you. I know the third one is like a little sketch with his cover of Let It Be, but...
Yeah, 1975 is when it came out.
Okay. I would like to do podcasts on those 3 Danny albums, to be honest with you.
I would do that.
Let's just play them.
You're going to do a podcast on the 3 Danny albums and not blues in Chicago? Come on.
Wait, what was Bob Welch's band before he joined Fleetwood Mac?
Paris.
No,
that was his
Head
band
West.
after. Head West, I think, was his band beforehand.
And then he did Seven Souls.
Yeah, Seven Souls. I think they lost a slide
okay.
in the Family Stone for this one competition that would have landed them a record deal.
Wow.
So Paris was after Heroes, but before French Kiss, right?
Paris
Yes,
is
correct.
the one you're thinking
Almost
of.
a heavy band.
I have their 2 CDs.
Paris is the heavy metal band he did. That was a really big influence on Guns N' Roses.
Oh
Really?
wow, cool. Oh
Actually
yeah,
hung around with them in the early 1980s. I think he allowed them to rehearse in his garage at one point.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, gentlemen. Well,
Okay.
any final thoughts?
Well, I got. We didn't talk about Like Crying. She's got so much blues.
That's on Then Play On, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
we'll
we're
see
going to
that
talk
for
about that
later.
next time.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about? I believe My Time Ain't Long.
We talked
Sure, we
about
can talk
that
about
already.
that.
We did. Okay.
Briefly.
Like Magic, Jigsaw, DJ. Okay. The Sun Is Shining.
Yep, covered that.
Okay. We pretty much got it banged out. All
We
right.
covered all of our bases, I think.
This is a very good show. I some of you guys are much more versed than I am in this. I appreciated that. I mean, there's a song called Madison Blues. I really like that live version. I don't know if it's ever been recorded. No, like it's this way has never been recorded in a studio, or
It was for Blues Jam.
It was for Blues Jam in
Oh,
Chicago.
really?
Actually, yeah, and I think that there's that came out a version that they recorded during Man of the World that's on either Vaudeville Years or Showbiz Blues.
Okay.
Like It This Way is, and
That's-
it's a solid studio version.
Okay.
The Chicago one though is worth listening to because Otis Spawn's playing the piano.
Okay.
And no one plays piano like Otis Spawn.
Yeah, I got that box set, so I need to just read.
But there is the other
Oh.
one that you're talking about, Jim. I think Only You, that song Only You, which is a great song.
Oh yeah.
And that was never I don't think in the studio, and it's such a great tune.
Yeah,
Oh,
not with,
that is so much. That is great.
It's my original vinyl.
Only you.
that one. Yeah, he did that on a solo album, but nobody else from Fleetwood Mac was on that recording, right? That was the third.
Yeah, that
Danny
was the-
Kerwin's third.
He
third.
he resurrected that again, and I think it's Bob Weston playing lead guitar on it.
Right.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Since he was out of a job also.
Lots of cross pollination.
Having an affair with
wow.
wasn't it Mick Fleetwood's wife?
Jenny Boyd.
Yeah.
All right.
Just one more. Just think if Jeremy and Peter and Danny hung together for like 3, 4, 5 more years, I think they would have been like superstars, just worldwide, because there's so much talent there
Yeah.
and so much bravado. I think they would have been they wouldn't have been a Fleetwood Mac, Buckingham Nicks,
I mean,
possibly.
if you think Stevie and Lindsay were explosive, imagine if those two
If
three
they-
would have stayed together
If
longer.
they would have just hung, because I mean, Jeremy was kind of coming away from the Peter Green, and they kind of on what's the next one here. They kind of got back together and worked as a band
Right.
on Then Play On. That's a great record. We're going to do it. So, but if they had it just one, or several more, they would have been worldwide. I mean,
I'm gonna give a hot take that's gonna
All
piss
right.
you guys all off. I would rather do Jeremy Spencer and the Children of God than the Blues in Chicago.
I
okay.
agree with that, actually.
Bad you.
All right. Well, the real reason we gathered today was to talk about Mr. Wonderful.
Yeah.
It's time to rate this album on a scale of 1 to 10.
Okay.
On the phone, Jim started off. Phonogenics rating.
It's a little. I think I did a 9.5 on the first one. This is like a 9.3. It's a cut below, but it's solid.
Okay. Sam, I'm gonna put you on the spot. You're new to the podcast. The heat is on. You're
Yeah, I mean, if for blues or authentic blues, whatever that means to anybody, I think that they did a great job. That's what they were going for, that authentic blues sound, the recording being live off the floor and everything. That side I would give it almost perfect, but with the song selection, and like I said, it could have been out of everybody's hands and they did it, or it was a piss take. What can I get away with? To me, relative to the other albums, I would put it as favorable, but not necessarily, somebody, I wouldn't be like, hey, if you want to check out Fleetwood Mac, you need to listen to this album.
right.
I would say positive, somewhere around a 7, maybe,
Okay. I think that's fair. Tony.
Well, I mean, yeah, because the Peter Green stuff on the album is like a total 10 for me.
Yeah, agree.
Oh.
And the Jeremy Spencer stuff, I mean, it's just the repetition of it. So, I mean, given that flaw, I would give it a 7, but really, I mean, what's good on it, I just absolutely love.
All right, Nick.
So this was the very last Fleetwood Mac studio album that I listened to. I would say that it's certainly not the first album I would recommend to anyone. It's more for the completionists like myself and everyone here for that matter. It's difficult. I would say that the only album that you can compare this to realistically is their very first one. And this is essentially their first one with horns. And then Dust My Broom repeated over and over and over again.
And Christy
So-
McVie, don't forget though.
And Christy McVie, of course. It's difficult. I'll probably give it a 7.3, 7.4, very similar to what I gave for the last album. I don't even remember what I gave it, but it's essentially in that very same ballpark. It'll be much better from Then Play On onward, though. You'll be getting very high ratings from me starting with that album.
We meet again in January, I think, because next month's the
No, wait.
yeah
December?
no, because I do Debbie Harry every other month.
Oh,
So
Yeah.
next month it's Debbie Harry Rockbird with the Blondie family, but we'll meet again next year. But
okay.
if this had been a 10-track album and one of the Jeremy Spencer song was in the middle of each side, I think it could have been a 9 or a 10. Honestly, like if they would have paced it better, they could have had 2 songs that sounded the same. It would have been okay. But they didn't do that, and ending side A with the same thing that starts side B was such a faux pas. Like seriously, people. So I too am going to give it 7.5.
You know, it's funny. They could say, "Hey, that song just ended. Play it again," and then instead of that, they just flip the record over.
Well,
I would say English Rose, though, pretty much eliminates all of the problems that Mr. Wonderful has. It gets rid of the repetition and then replaces them with the wonderful singles that were never included on the album. So English Rose, I would say, is probably one of the best Peter Green, Jeremy Spencer era albums, barring Then Play On.
I mean, I was surprised when I got a little bit old. Like, this came out before the internet. Like, I got this as an import at Blockbuster Music when I lived in Buffalo. I really thought this was the second Fleetwood Mac album. And think of a world where it was. You know, I think it's a really, really solid album.
Very good, yes.
I mean, it was.
Yeah, but I really need Rolling Man. And it's like I need Rolling Man, and it's not on there. And there are things, and I love Lazy Poker Blues. It's like those 2 songs are not there. So I need Mr. Wonderful as much as it's easy to. I mean, I do think the compilation is better, but there are things on Mr. Wonderful you can't get anywhere else, and I just love them.
Yeah, I
Okay.
agree with that too.
I have a final question for the panel before we end for the year, sadly.
Yeah.
If you're in a dark alley, what would you rather encounter?
Oh, jeez.
A or B? All right, you really don't have to answer that. That's a rhetorical question. Leave it in the YouTube comments. Thank you to everyone on Patreon for paying my bills. I'm glad that I don't lose money on the podcast. I break even. So that's cool.
Okay.
And
Well,
thank you.
thank you for having me, everybody.
All right.
It's been really
good
fun.
addition.
It was great having you.
Love meeting you.
Sam,
Sam.
Love your
I hope you
commentary.
stick around. Stick around, Sam.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
we'd
I'll
love to have
definitely
you.
be back. Yeah, and I hope everybody enjoys the holidays and has a
Uh-huh.
great New Year too.
All right.
Yeah.
And Alicia and John, we missed you. Nathan and Roland, fuck you guys for not. And
Yeah, we're
Steven,
having a good time.
I'm just teasing. I love you guys. I say that with love. Much love. All right. Till we meet again, I'm coming your way in 2025 because we're going to be fighting for Madge and we will then play on. All right. Thank
I'm
you
ready for
guys.
it. Thank you.
Bye.